Welcome and thank you for joining us for Liberty Nation TV. Bienvenue et merci de vous rejoindre en nous, Liberty Nation TV. That is the dual language, Mark, because we're going to be talking about a Canadian issue, and they have a bilingual rule up there. We don't want to run afoul of that. Mark Angelides, managing editor for LibertyNation.com. Thank you for joining us for this Liberty Nation TV segment.
Merci bien, mon ami.
Well, you've got me there. I actually wrote down my French words because that's all I know. That and a few alcoholic beverages I may be able to order, and foie gras, of course, which is superior. But they've got some trouble in Canada now, or maybe not, over the youthful indiscretions, perhaps, of their young leader, Mr. Trudeau, and his brownface escapades. We've seen now a lot of trouble in the United States with Democrat politicians in blackface, and to be not quite as racist in the North, they've downgraded. It's not blackface up there, it's brownface. Why don't you give us some of the details, Mark?
Well, I don't think it's the terminology that it's really because they're trying to be less agrarious with what they're doing. It's because Justin Trudeau was apparently dressed as Aladdin. So clearly that's not, Aladdin is not of African descent. So they've downgraded it on a color scale, but not quite the offense scale.
No, Aladdin is a Disney invention, right?
I got you right. I see you're kidding there. Okay. I hope you're kidding there.
Oh, I mean, this is not a real person, right? To dress as Aladdin is not to insult an actual culture or a real person, is my meaning. Well,
I mean, that really depends. I mean, the Arabian Nights stories have they really are an integral part of certain cultures, in the same way that our stories in the Western realms are quite indicative of our cultures. You've got we have the oldest, one of the oldest stories that we still use in, let's call it the Judeo-Christian culture today, is all ties back to the Gilgamesh epic, and these stories that they become quite important to cultures in many ways.
Mark, I have learned a lot about that from listening to your podcast, The Rabbit Hole: Politics and Prose, where you feature discussions about the Gilgamesh epic that I have enjoyed. So it sounds like there's cause for genuine offense then, I guess, for some folks anyway, in this regard. We all know that he's getting an easy ride, though, from the media. But Trudeau has a federal election, or Canada has a federal election coming up next month in October. Will this affect him, do you believe? Or affect the elections?
Almost definitely. I mean, this I think it's October 21st. These elections, it's a tightly contested election, which it shouldn't have been. If you go back about 6 months, this really should have been Prime Minister Trudeau's election to lose. It was really all in his hands. But the mounting scandals over, we hear about it in the UK quite a lot, about certain imprisonments, and of course corruption and bribery. And this is really a government that's in the middle of a crisis, and you never want to be a government in crisis going into an election that was always going to be fairly tight. So yeah, the fact that this came out now, it's clearly something to do with the election. But it will impact Justin Trudeau. Whether that's enough for him to actually lose his position, we don't know yet. But it makes the race a lot tighter than it was.
Okay, Mark, in your written piece for LibertyNation.com about the incident, you focused more about the public apology rather than anything else. Why is that?
I think it is obvious that this is something that was deeply regrettable. I am wary of being definitive about this because the recent pictures that came out, I had not remembered.
There is no escaping this. No way to put Justin Trudeau's racist Aladdin costume back in the bottle. And now we know.
Okay, so here's my theory. The world found out about Justin Trudeau's brownface escapades in his youth through the media, as we often do. But Justin Trudeau must have already known about it. And here's my thing. This is a guy who has pitched himself as the progressive in the world, the global leader in progressive policies and forward thinking. Yet he knew that these things
asking Canadians to forgive me for what I
would
did.
come out at some point. And yet he didn't bring them up himself. What he could have done early in his career and said, I've made this mistake, not once, not twice, I believe it's 3 times now. And just got that out in the open. That would have shown honesty, integrity, and bravery. The fact that he didn't shows me that he lacks all 3 of those things. Now, as we've seen with, as you pointed out earlier, with the American Democrats, Governor Northam, for example, and was it his second in command also?
My own governor, by the way. This is all Virginia-based, something in the water here. Yes. So
these gentlemen have engaged in this practice, and they're still in position. They've weathered the storm. Justin Trudeau will ultimately weather the same storm. But what's missing here is these are people who are talking about race-based issues, cultural appropriation, and putting them not just as things that we should all be considering when we think about the good governance of a country, but they're putting them front and center of their actual carefully sculpted images, their public personas. And yet he lied. He covered up. And he was not brave enough to actually just come out and admit before the photos came out that this is something that he's engaged in. And this is a worry. So this person, you have to consider what their motivation is. Why didn't Justin Trudeau tell people many years ago when he started on his political career that, you know what, I made some mistakes when I was a little bit younger. I've realized going into politics that I need to represent all people. And that makes me think that these things that I did are not correct. And I want to apologize for those in advance and then move on with his career. He didn't do that. What did he do instead, Scott?
Well, we call it, by the way, getting out ahead of it in terms of bad information, right? And also in terms of lawyering, if you have some negative fact that's going to be disclosed to the jury, the lawyer who knows about the fact that's going to be disclosed, you want to be the one to disclose it to the jury to kind of soften the blow as much as possible. And the answer to your question is what he did was he concealed the fact that he behaved this way, which maybe that's because he thought he could get away with it, or he thought that because of his progressive bona fides, it would be ignored or basically, you know, less of a big issue than it is.
So he chose to make a decision based on what would be best for him.
Well, yeah, he's a politician.
Career-wise.
No, what are you talking about?
The very true, Scott.
The sky is blue and water's wet. Yeah, that's right. That's what he did.
But if somebody is willing to do this anyway, then doesn't this shouldn't this make people question, you know, if he's willing to do it over a personal matter, what else is he willing to do it over? This shouldn't be a question of should the public support Trudeau because he's made some poor decisions. It should be that he's willing to cover up, willing to just ignore certain elements if it's going to help him personally. And if he's doing that on a personal basis, perhaps he's doing that on a professional basis too.
For LibertyNation.com, Mark Angelides, managing editor, thank you for joining us on this Liberty Nation TV. This is Scott DeCosenza. Au revoir.